All right, so welcome back for those of you who've been attending the last few sessions. In this session, we're going to be looking at Maya and talking with a bunch of internal experts on the product. Just to give you an idea of who's standing here, we have Chris Viano, who is the Director of Product Management. Thank you. And we have Craig Barr, who works on my team. He is a specialist in Maya and Mudbox. We have Duncan Brinsmead, who is one of our lead wizards in the development team for Maya. Many people have seen him in a number of earlier presentations over the years, showing whatever wizardry he happens to be working on at that moment. And then we have also from my team, Daryl Obert, who is our Maya and Motion Builder specialist on my team. And so between everyone here, we're hoping we can answer a lot of your questions. And obviously, we had a bunch of questions sent in early. I'm going to do my usual housekeeping, which I'm sure everyone here live is getting tired of hearing. But as always, if you've ever dealt with any large corporation, you will know that the one thing we're not allowed to do is give you any statements about the future of the products, things that we're doing in the future. Basically, this isn't an Autodesk rule. This is an SEC rule. This is all about publicly traded companies and what we're allowed to do. So many people would be very unhappy if we did it. We, as a group, would love to tell you all the stuff we're working on that's cool and going on behind the scenes that we can't show you yet, but we're not allowed. So if you're asking those questions in the chat window, likely we're just going to ignore them because all we would be able to say is, I can't tell you. So with that, we'll dive into the process. So one of the first questions we have on the list, and this is something that I think is universal to any application. There's always people looking for tips and tricks on this, is what can I do to increase playback speed in Maya? And we happen to have what I consider one of the worldwide experts on how to tweak every last frame per second out of Maya as Daryl Obert over here in the corner. That's the life he leads, and he's figured out every loophole to do it. So I think we'll let him give just a few tips and tricks on ways to boost the speed inside of Maya. So take it away, Daryl.
Well, that is a good question. And you know, there's lots of different ways of increasing speed. We've been working on adding more ways of doing it, and in 2014 we have really nice scene assembly tools. So this allows you to have in your file multiple representations of an asset, basically. So you can have it a bounding box version, a full rigged version, maybe a GPU cached version using Olympic's GPU caching, which is really awesome. The GPU cached versions basically bypass everything in Maya's dependency graph and dump it directly to the card. So it's ridiculously fast for meshes. So if you kind of dial in the amount of information you want to get represented in your scene using the scene assembly tools, and that's something that's been a multi-release effort. And with 2014, we've added a couple more new things in there. A couple other things that you can do to get speed is obviously use Viewport 2.0. Let's go ahead and pull up a character here, and I'll show you a few little tricks on an actual character. Let's see if we grab this one. So Viewport 2.0 for moving geometry around is actually extremely fast. When you first open up a scene now, if you always make sure that you save your scene not in a lit or not in a textured mode, if you save it in 5 by hitting the hotkey to go to default, no textures, it'll load without having to actually bring in all those textures. So if you've got a scene that's got gigabytes of texture maps and you just want to open it up and nudge a character, if you were smart and you saved it out without textures turned on and without the hypershade window up, it's going to load really, really quick. So that's a great tip. You should always save your files without textures turned on. Another thing that's kind of so you'll see is when I hit 6 here, I just hit 6. So now we're waiting for it to cache in all these textures, and you can see how much longer this takes. And this is a pretty simple scene, but it takes a good 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds for it to come through and grab all that information and cache all that in. So if all I had to do was open this guy up and nudge that little muffler, not having to wait for those textures to load in is a good trick. So Viewport 2 is honestly the fastest way to get stuff moving around quickly. It's very, very quick. There are a couple things if you have deforming geometry. If you bring up the options for Viewport 2.0, you want to make sure that you have hardware caching turned on. So what that does is it's going to take the first time that your character plays back through and vertex cache it, and that's going to make deforming geometry playback much faster. There's a trick to make this work with skinned rigs, though. What you need to do is you need to make sure that on your skinned rig, on that skin cluster, to go in there and turn off use deformer normals. So let's go ahead and grab a version of this guy that's got a skin cluster on there. So if you look at this skin cluster, if you turn off deform user normals, this will make that vertex caching work and be much faster. So, there's always different areas you can look to for performance, but just doing a couple smart things like making sure that you don't have textures and the hypershade window up when you save your file, so when you open it, it comes in quick. Knowing about turning off deformer normals on deforming meshes if you're in viewport 2.0 and you want that caching to kick in. You know, you're losing fidelity and quality a little bit when you do that, but you're gaining speed. And then obviously using all the scene assembly tools that allow you to break down your scene into, you know, multiple representations of the geometry. It lets you get massive amounts of data in very, very quickly. And we'll look at the scene assembly tools a little bit more tonight during the main presentation.
Perfect. Now I know I've already seen a number of questions roll up on the chat thing. When is this all coming out? When can we expect it? What's it going to be like? So I'll let Chris take a shot at it.
So I'm holding here one of the first boxes that have come off the assembly line for the 2014 releases. Usually it's a couple weeks. It has to go through some processing, but the release should come out in about 2 weeks. Available for download for people on subscription, and then available through the regular channels that you guys know.
Perfect. So I have one here for Craig, which was, where did it go? What should I do in Maya to get a model ready for Mudbox? What are the tips on making sure things work well?
Sure. Thanks, Sean. Sure. So there are a couple things you could do. We had this question actually yesterday on the Mudbox panel for what you can do with a mesh to prep it to go into Mudbox. So there are several things. This is specific to Maya. The first thing I recommend is definitely familiarize yourself with the mesh cleanup tool. So if you go underneath the mesh menu and you, if Daryl wants to just show mesh cleanup, just grab that little window and pop it open. There are a couple things in there that I find really useful. As I mentioned yesterday, by default you'll see that the clean up the issues is set on by default. I prefer to have it selected because there are things in my mesh that I may want that way. So I'm not saying I don't trust Maya. Duncan, don't get angry. I'm not saying that. I just said I want to.
Selected mode too.
Yes. Okay. Good. So
you know what you're doing. Man.
Exactly. You're working with.
Know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing.
So by using that selection rather than just automatically cleaning it up, it's giving you the option to review it yourself and find the issues and confirm if they are actually issues. There may be things in there that aren't really an issue, and that is the way that the mesh is constructed to go. Another thing, another simple tip is just basic good, clean subdivision tips, and that is if you're going to work with anything with subdivision, it doesn't matter if it's any package that works with subdivision, you want to have good, clean quads, right? So Mudbox will handle mixed geometry, so you could have quads, triangles, n-gons mixed, but obviously the more efficient and clean the mesh, the more efficient the subdivision is going to be. And again, that's not just a Mudbox thing, that's anything that works with subdivision. So working with good, clean quads, making sure that all your verts are welded together or merged together, no holes in the mesh, no double edges or overlapping quads or anything kind of weird like that. Just make sure your mesh is good and clean. Another tip is too, constantly hit the 3 key, number 3 key in Maya just to get a smooth mesh preview. And often that's going to quickly identify if you have a reversed face, for example, you're going to see a really odd version of your smooth mesh preview. Making sure your normals are good. I always have on my shelf, my custom shelf, I have a couple tools that I'm always referring to when I'm working with a model, and one of them is I'll constantly turn on my face normals, right? I'll take a look at those, make sure that I don't have any reversed faces there, because that can cause an issue once you get sculpting, as well as, of course, with texture painting. I think that kind of covers some of the tips.
So there was also a question here. Someone obviously heard that we'd done something about dealing with missing textures and things like that. Anyone talk a little bit about kind of the method of remapping missing texture maps, things like that?
Sure. Actually, that's been a kind of a thorn in the side of Maya people for a long time. You know, you open up a scene that maybe it was in a different part of the pipeline, or a friend was using, or someone gave you a scene, and you have the textures, but you open up the scene and they're all mapped, to the absolute path or something, right? So that's been really frustrating. Well, we now have, finally, it's actually, we're kind of proud to announce that we have a file path editor. So I think Daryl has it up on the screen there. And what the file path editor will do is it will identify, the example he's using here, his scene is nice and clean. It's showing you with a green check mark that everything is good and fine as far as file paths. Now, this isn't just for textures as well. It's for references, any kind of anything you're sourcing into your scene, audio files as well. It'll go through and find. And the nice thing about it is if you need to repath, we have a repath button. You can do an auto resolve, or you can repath it and direct it, steer it manually right to the directory you need. And it works well. We were talking the other day, I had a scene assembly file I was working with, and I did over 23,000 missing files in one go. So it does work, and it works quite well.
Now, this is a question that's come up in the last couple sessions, so I'm going to pass this one to Chris to talk about the question of what's going on with Naiad.
Sure. So last summer we acquired the Naiad technology, and we also acquired some really great people. Marcus Nordestrom, the founder of Naiad, is a great guy and is someone that's really come on and been a great addition to the effects team. So we've been working hard. The plan, and we announced from the beginning, was that we're not shipping the Naiad product as Autodesk. They're working on some new stuff. As we said, we can't talk about the future releases that we have today, but these guys are really working hard on some cool stuff that you'll see in the future.
All right, I've got one for Duncan that I think you can take a shot at. This is one that came in earlier, which was, what was the possibility of particle instances and collisions according to their shapes? Is this possible in Maya, or is there a way around it? So, Duncan?
Yeah, I've got... the shorter answer is no, you can't directly collide the shape of the instance object. We haven't added that yet. Right now, the particle collisions are just sphere only, so there are kind of tricks you can work around it. The sphere-only collision has a very simplified sphere collision model, but with rotation, so your instances can kind of rotate nicely. And so for small debris and stuff, that can work well. I've been trying some other techniques recently. It is probably a little too involved to show right now, but I'm going to show at my talk later, which involve using clusters of particles and then deriving a rotation from a cluster of particles constrained together, and then using that to drive the instancer rotation, and then use the particles to drive the collisions with the object. So you can then kind of simplify your object by fitting particles to it, and then these particle groups will kind of give you a very rough shape or boundary. So, in other words, things will settle nicely. You can do things like, say, a cylinder shape, like a bullet casing, can be done with two spherical particles constrained together, and then you can get the rotation from that and apply that to the instance of the actual casing. And the cool thing about this is it's very robust, because the particles have a sense of inside and outside on the collision, and you can do just thousands and thousands of them at real-time speeds, and it doesn't get stuck or anything any place. You can actually scoop it and pour it in real time. You get so many things. So I've got some examples that do that, and I'm going to most of the examples of my presentation I'm going to try and post on my blog in the next week or so you'd be able to download those and try them out. Plus, I'm working on a script which will enable you to kind of model these spheres and select an object you want to instance, and it will then do the particle setup and everything kind of automatically for you and create emitters with the instance object, so you can then get collisions that kind of match it.
Perfect. Now I have a question for Daryl. This was one that we received, I think, yesterday. What's the fastest, easiest way to duplicate a reference with input graph, keeping the reference nodes as a reference?
Haven't actually tried that, so I can't say for sure. I would try the duplicate special. Under duplicate, we have, let's just go into duplicate special. You can see that that's where you're going to get the options for how you're going to handle the graphs coming into nodes, whether you want to duplicate those inputs that are coming in, or if you want to just have those connections sort of mirrored on the duplication, so that you're not actually duplicating the function curves and things like that. So that's the first place I would look. But like I said, I haven't actually tried it.
Perfect.
Yeah, duplicate special works pretty well. There's some other things. I mean, in some cases, I've done certain types of duplicate that the duplicate special won't handle by hand. So you can kind of make your own connections. So something I like to do if I want a bunch of different meshes that feed off of one mesh. You can create a bunch of mesh nodes and connect out mesh to in mesh on the other meshes, and they'll kind of derive from its properties too. So I find those kind of techniques are useful.
Now, one of the questions here was, and I think we covered this a little bit yesterday in the Mudbox side of things, but maybe Craig, you can kind of just give a high-level overview of this, which is how do I create morph targets in Mudbox and use them as blend shapes in Maya?
Sure.
I can jump over there? Or?
Yeah, I can jump.
You can just steal Daryl's.
Okay, I'll do that.
We'll let Craig and Daryl swap seats.
I'm excited to sit on this. I haven't got a chance to be up here.
Daryl's just happy to get away from the machine.
Yeah. I'm on the hot seat. I'm over here. This is where the drinks are. And, fancy software boxes and the good stuff.
Okay, so we have Mudbox open here. Yep. So I'll do this as quick as possible here. We talked a bit about this yesterday. Actually, Mudbox is great for creating blend shapes, especially working directly with Maya. So if you're going back and forth between the meshes here, it's actually really simple the way we've hooked this up here. So with any of the sculpting tools inside Mudbox, you can create morph targets. And this actually, I should point out as well, works just the same with Max, if you were using Max as well, as it does with Maya. So the cool thing about this is the layer system, right? You're stacking up all of your layers of different blend shapes. So for example, in this case here, if I have a blend shape, well, let's just grab the grab brush in here. I'm actually working with a mouse, which just feels blasphemous here to me, but we'll work with that. So if I drop down a new sculpt layer in here, I can start to use, let's grab this, bring this up. So I can, let's turn mirroring off. That's what I want to show. That's kind of cool. So if I just start to grab, for example, a part here, I'll just quickly rough that in. Simple little edge of the lip up on the layer. The nice thing about that system is that if I just quickly right-click and duplicate the layer, I can then flip that layer, right? So what I've effectively done there is I've created the left and the right side on here. So I need to correct that mesh or smooth that mesh out there a little bit. But the point is that the nice thing about this is you can use mirroring while you're sculpting by simply turning that on so that you're getting both sides of the mesh. But it's nice to be able to get kind of 3 for 1 here. Model one side, duplicate it, and flip it over. And if you wanted to, you could have each side individually. Or then you can even duplicate them further and merge those two together. So just by doing that one-sided sculpt, you now have a left side, duplicate, you have the right side, and then you could do a version that's blended together to have them both as one. So just put from one simple sculpt layer and duplicating and flipping. And then the way that we handle this back to Maya, there's a couple ways. So if you're using the one-click workflow in the Send to Maya or Send to Max version there as well, if we look under Preferences, by default in the Send to preferences, Flatten Sculpt Layers is set. You can turn on Export Sculpt Layers on current mesh level as Maya blend shapes, and it works really well. So you send this over to Maya, and it'll actually, I'm not going to, I don't want to ruin your scene. But if I send this over, I will. It'll come in as a blend shape node, and you'll be able to access all of these blend shapes. Same thing. If you're in Maya and you're working with a mesh with blend shapes, you send it over to Mudbox. All of those blend shapes will be stacked as sculpt layers. And the last thing I'll point out is if you wanted to export the mesh independently into a different directory, underneath the FBX preferences in Mudbox is export layers as blend shapes. That's off by default, but if you click that on and you export your mesh out as an FBX model, all of these blend shapes will be saved with it. You can bring it back and work with it there.
Perfect. One of the other questions we had on here was that just came in the online chat was asking about any improvements to node editors inside of Maya. Daryl, you want to try and?
Yeah, so the node editor in Maya for 2014 has had a lot of improvements made to it. This is another one of those kind of multi-release efforts that we've had. So we started the node editor release, or maybe 2 releases ago, and 2014's had a lot of workflow improvements made to it. So a lot of things are just simple hotkeys that make working with it much faster. So if you use the number keys going 1 through 5, you're going to display different levels of sort of detail. So the higher the number gets, the more attributes that show up in a given node. So you can go from a very compressed, simplified view all the way up to every attribute that's possible to be connected. Adding simple things like search bars and filter bars. So when you have a node that has 200 attributes on it and you're trying to find just one attribute, it can be really daunting. So being able to filter that out just with a simple text editor in that node. The node editor is great for creating nodes also by hitting the tab key. So 2014's got a lot of nice things that you just, when you work with it, it feels better. Things like snapping. When you get a node close to a port that it can go into, it'll snap to it automatically. If it's a single attribute, only single attribute names attributes on the input and the output side will kind of line up, and it will kind of gray out if it's a vector attribute, like something like RGB or XYZ, and you're trying to pipe a float into that. Those would be grayed out automatically, so you know they're not options for you. So it does a lot of nice little smart things that it didn't used to do before. So I'd say play around with it in 2014, and I think you'll be pretty happy because it has had a lot of workflow things. Kind of the foundation was there, but all this sort of polish got added to it in 2014.
We're being asked to do the Harlem Shake. Oh my God, that's not going to happen.
Maybe late tonight after.
Yeah,
the event.
maybe after the party,
yeah.
we'll once the alcohol and the oysters have been consumed, we'll look at a Harlem Shake. Maybe that's a bad connotation after.
It just sounds awful, Sean. Let's just move on.
Maybe if the oysters are bad.
Yeah, exactly. The Harlem Shakes kick in after bad oysters. So another question that came in earlier on in the last couple of days was asking about Skyline, and I don't know if everyone online knows what Skyline was, but I'll let Chris kind of bring everyone up to speed.
Sure, and there seems to be some questions about mental ray as well, but someone being we'll get to that in a second. So Skyline was a research project. Again, we have a bunch of projects that we usually put on our lab site. There's one called Project Pinocchio right now, where it's actually a really interesting a site where you can create rig characters from a website. So Skyline was a research effort that we did in conjunction with, actually, if you look at the PS4 being announced, obviously we've been working with a lot of the bigger companies, and that research effort has stopped. We're looking at how that technology can flow into future versions of Maya, but Skyline, the research project, you probably won't hear about it again.
There we go. And this is why we don't talk about future of development, because we'll do research, and we're never quite sure sometimes when we're doing research what exactly it's going to end up doing. All right, question here that can go to Duncan, I think, is there any news about improvements as far as Maya fluids or anything to do with fluid technology inside of Maya?
So this isn't a big release in terms of Maya fluids, but we do have a few things. I could maybe show a couple items. Let me get my laptop plugged in here. Yeah, thanks.
For the guys in the back there, we're just swapping laptops, so you're probably just got the shock of everything going black on you. There it is. Perfect. We're up and running.
Yeah.
Technology is great when it works.
Let's see. Which one would be? There. Okay. So one of the things we added was the ability to fill a fluid object from a mesh instead of just with an emitter node and stuff. So here I've got like a simple mesh, and it's tied to the fluid. And one of the other things is we have a new mode of emission where if I just run the fluid here, you can kind of see what happens, right? I've got this little fluid simulation that's just emitting from the object. Now this is an auto resize fluid, and I can move my object now. Now it's in a new position, and I'm rewound, and it just automatically jumps to the emission point. I'm at frame 0 right now, right? If we look at the fluid, you'll see there's under the emitter, under the basic emitter attributes, we now have I guess it's this emitter 2. Yeah, so you see we have a fill object tab, and on the fluid menu there's you can attach an object to emitter. So you can do emit from object, and you can have a mesh selected, and instead of just emitting from the mesh surface, you can emit from the mesh interior now. And so that's what the fill object does. And then you also have this other mode, a start frame emission. So we can choose to, if that's off, it just emits like it normally does. So there's no emission of the start frame, and it just emits continually. And you can animate the emitter rate and stuff. You can emit at the start and all frames. So it's sort of like the normal emission mode, plus it also emits on the very start frame. So when you rewind, there's also some emission. Or start frame only, which is quite useful for this kind of object emission. A lot of times to get this start frame only emission behavior, what I'd do is you'd simulate a couple of frames, and then you'd kind of cache the fluid initial state. And then when you'd rewind, you'd have a fluid initial state. This doesn't require a fluid initial state. It just automatically emits when you load. And also, again, combined with auto resize is quite nice. So I can go in and I can edit this mesh. If we let's see, select some CVs. And I'll just move those. You can see I'm just... and automatically we get the emission from the new shape. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's
really nice
feature.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of other little things we added, a few bug fixes and things, but that's one of the major.
Perfect. And this one we have here is for Craig. How do I export crease sets on a subdivided mesh out of Maya?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure. Do we have anything in here with crease sets on them or creasing going on in here, Daryl? Or I can just throw something on here.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah, we need to reconnect over here.
Screen going black. Screen coming back.
Yep. So we were talking about crease sets. So let me just do a really quick something in here. If we just take a simple object, we have a couple ways of handling that, and the way that crease sets within working with them within Maya and outside of Maya. So actually transferring them or storing that data to be used in other packages. For example, Mudbox. So if you're working with subdivisions and you need to preserve creases on your creature or your even a hard surface object. One of the ways that we can do this, of course, with a default sphere cube, if I hit 3 on that, it's pretty much a ball right there, right? So let's take this and let's just make this into something a little more model-friendly. So anyways, using my 3 hotkey, you see that we're getting all these rounded corners on here. So if we grab some edges, I'm just going to start to grab this edge loop over here. And what we can do now, if we go underneath our mesh menu, we have a couple things underneath Edit Mesh. So we have the Crease tool, but we also have this nice handy Crease Set Editor. And this is new to 2014. I should point out, I don't know if anyone's noticing that we have these green highlighted areas in here. You can turn that off if you want. We've left it on for the purpose of this panel here, but that's highlighting all of the new different things. Underneath menu sets, you'll find them. There's our new reduce algorithm there. But so, for example, Crease Set Editor is highlighted here. And what I can do with that, with an edge, I can create a brand new crease set in there, and I can start to stack up my different crease sets. And the cool thing about this is that if I work with different edges in here, I can begin to grab all different new ones and adjust the crease sets on there. So in this case here, we can maybe crank that up a little bit more to work with that. Or our top one that we had on there, bring it right down. So you can see that it's zoom in on here, so that we're working with that down at a lower level, or even crank it up to a much higher level. The idea being, if you have a very complex model, this is a great way to store all that data. Previously, you had to kind of go in and either have selection sets for all of your different creases and keep track of that. This is a nice way to bring all of that together to actually create creases and be able to go back and edit them later. And then, of course, with sending out of our creases here, if you have your Smooth Mesh preview on, you send that over to Mudbox. It'll bring those creases over for you. You can export it with FBX by making sure your Smooth Mesh is on at the export settings as well. But the original question was how to handle crease sets, right?
How to export them.
How to export them. Okay, so then once you've got all your crease sets in here, now you can, a couple ways, you can do the one-click send to, or you can do an export selection. In this case here, if you're exporting them, utilize the FBX export. And if you jump into our include options here, actually, let's go down to here, go to edit preset. And the default preset, if we go underneath geometry and make sure smooth mesh is selected on there, we can export it that way. Smoothing groups as well, you can export to be able to share different smoothing information the way that Max handles this back and forth as well. So I think that'll answer that, hopefully.
Yep. Perfect. So let's see here. We had another question on here asking about, what was it? We've lost it now. Well, obviously there was someone early on constantly asking about Mental Ray and if anything had updated or changed in the world of Mental Ray recently.
Yeah, Mental Ray has had some improvements made to it for this release. We've rolled up to the most current version of Mental Ray, which is nice, and we've switched over to have unified sampling set as the default. So we've kind of changed the render settings window to get current, I guess is the easiest way to put it, so that we're using Mental Ray's new unified sampling as our main kind of quality control versus speed for setting up all of your sampling on your objects. You can obviously roll back to the old way of doing it. If you want to get back to the legacy sampling, you have that option. We've changed a couple of the presets also, minor things like the number of bounces that we have, lights, things like that. The render resolution has changed from 4:3 to 16:9. So there's some couple little things inside of there, but the main stuff is getting into the unified sampling, and there's some improvements made to IPR where it can benefit from some of the goodness that Mental Ray's had that we haven't been accessing in the past. I know Chris wants to add anything to it.
All right. I got it. Now, one of the other questions that was being asked was around Pixar subdivision technology. Everyone's been talking about it. Is there any plans to have something like that in Maya? Chris, you want to?
So again, we're very supportive of things like Alembic and Open Subdiv, and we actually are pretty big contributors on the open source side. We do a lot of coding for those guys. So there was a demo at SIGGRAPH. The Open Subdiv effort is a big one. It's a big job to switch out something like that. So we're working together with those guys to make sure that the standard gets into the community, because we need support from not only our products, but we also need support from people like V-Ray and Arnold, so that this standard actually goes through the whole industry, so that it's not just one-sided. So we're working with Pixar and all of our partners to make sure that this thing is a success. But it's not in 2014. Yeah.
There you go. You heard it here. Another question here was, and we'll see if I understand exactly how this works. I'll just say it out loud. How to paint a textured tiled roof with depth and reasonable tiling size in Autodesk Maya on a surface. Anyone want to take thoughts of what that might be?
There's a bunch of different approaches to that. I'm sure we could all
Pitch an
come up with a
approach.
couple.
So one way of painting tiling textures is to go into the canvas mode. So you can use all the paint effects brushes, and in canvas mode you can turn on repeat. So you can paint across an edge and it flips over to the next edge. So that's one way. And obviously, I'm sure.
I was going to also suggest Substance in Maya. That's an excellent way to do something like that. Repeated patterns, repeated textures, like a roof tile pattern that you can also build the depth into as well. The obvious answer that I would say as well is shoot it over to Mudbox, and you have the power of not only tiled texturing, but tiled sculpting, so that you can build a full sculpted detail. The other really cool thing with that, of course, is that you can now retopo that, generate a whole new mesh from there as well, which is kind of neat. But you could tile your sculpted data and your painted data, and then from there generate a whole series of normal maps and or displacements, vector displacements, but Substance as well. And I think the paint effects one. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could approach it, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, another question here was about Maya and multi-threading. What is the kind of current push on multi-threading inside of Maya? Are there new things that we're working on multi-threading? Anything changed?
I don't know of anything in certainly outside of in the dynamics area. I know there are a couple of bugs and stuff we fixed that are threading related, but we didn't add any new threading to like cloth or any of that stuff.
Well, I know one of the things I hear all the time wasn't in one of these express questions, but maybe Duncan, you can kind of talk towards it. Is there's this kind of tendency of all users to think that every operation should automatically get a 100% speed boost from multi-threading and things like that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the realities of multi-threading.
Yeah, I mean, threading is not, an easy thing where you just kind of enable it. Sometimes algorithms aren't threadable. And sometimes if you just take a simple algorithm and thread it, it can actually make it slower. And there are all these little factors that creep in. It's actually quite hard with certain algorithms to thread them. Some like the Maya Fluid Solver, actually the way we do it with Yastamp's backprop technique really amends it. It threads very nicely. You can because nothing knows about anything else, and we get really nice linear increases with number of processors on that algorithm. Other things, not so much. Cloth is a little harder because of all the complex constraints and dependencies and stuff, and we've got a thing that builds a complicated graph and tries to execute, the different things with this evaluation graph, that are nice little islands that don't relate to each other and stuff, but it starts to get very hard.
Yeah, and the other thing that for us, working with a lot of the larger customers who are just dealing with bigger and bigger and bigger data sets, and that's why the scene assembly work that we've done in conjunction with a lot of these bigger customers, where they just build multiple representations of a lot of objects, and they do things like caching, or they do things like the demos you'll see online of making bounding box versions of a lot of objects. And again, it's more like authoring performance and having control over it, like Daryl did earlier, is sometimes the better approach than just sort of, trying to, let the computer do everything. So again, the scene assembly stuff that's in the 2014 stuff is actually really neat for authoring performance.
Now, another question that we got was around paint effects and the Occupy surface stuff that's going on. Duncan, you think you could take us through a little bit of how that works?
I could show some of that.
All right, everyone, screens are going to go black again for a second if you're seeing the computers while we switch over.
Let's give it a second here. This is something different. I got the. That's let me find something here. It shows. Okay. Yeah. To demo it, I suppose this rows on wall will give you an idea. This is just a very simple demo. So I've got a paint effect stroke and an object here, and I'll select them. And we've got a new. Also, by the way, you note that some of these items are green, which is a nice new feature itself. That we have highlighting of new items in Maya, and you can disable it if you want, but it's kind of nice if you're a long-time Maya user to get a new version and be able to see in the menu features that are new. So here I do a make collide on these, which is a new thing in Paint Effects. And not only does this have make collide, but this stroke also has a bunch of attributes on it that use Occupy surface stuff on the stroke. So what that does is for either the stroke that you've painted the paint effects on or any object that you've got colliding with it, it generates a cloud of points on the surface of the object that are attractors. And it is attracted to those points, and when the branch is growing and it reaches a point, it says it's now occupied that. And that means that other branches can't get into that point as occupied. So it's a type of space competition, and it actually derives from an algorithm that's at SIGGRAPH a few years ago. It's a simple but pretty interesting algorithm. Now it's quite modified for PaintFX because the PaintFX has its own morphology kind of built in, so it's a way of kind of adapting PaintFX to use this. So now I can I've got collisions, and this is trying to grow into regions here on this object which do not have any flowers, so that you won't get flowers clumping up in clustering places, so they'll tend to grow apart. You can also do things like kill off branches if it gets too crowded, so it won't only just not grow into region, but it'll actually die on the branch. So you've got a branch termination thing. And you can, I could edit the shape of the object, or scale it and all those kind of things. And you can move the stroke as well. So I could, if I select the stroke, I could move it around, and it'll behave however it meets up with the object, right? And so that's kind of nice. You can kind of paint things like networks of veins on objects and have them flow around the objects, collide with them, and move into unoccupied regions on the object and cover it. And there's a whole host of other features associated with it. That's sort of the occupy surface. We also have an occupy volume, and again, I'll go into a lot of detail on this. It's actually probably about 80% of my talk today is like the PaintFX stuff. So I've got a lot of stuff, and ad nauseum I'll go into on it. But the other complement with this is the line modifier node in PaintFX lets you define a volume of points that it attracts to, as opposed to it being just on the surface. And so you can define a region of space you want the PaintFX to grow into and occupy. And branches will avoid each other. So it creates a type of, it looks a little bit like you're doing self-collision a bit, but it's different than doing self-collision on the strokes. And that combined with the collide gives you a lot of flexibility for the morphology of stuff you create with PaintFX. So I think it's pretty exciting.
All right. Now, we're getting closer to the end of our session. I wanted to see if anyone here in the room had any burning questions on their uses of Maya up till this point. It doesn't have to be about anything new, but just anything that find. Yeah.
I think yesterday they said something about how the transition from Mudbox to Maya is much more fluid. And I was wondering, is that because Maya, this newer version of Maya, can just handle more memory?
All right, so the question was asking, people are talking about how there's a much more fluid interaction between products like Mudbox and Maya. Does that have anything to do with changes in how Maya can deal with data better, or is that just about the bridge?
Nothing much has changed in there as far as directly data between the two apps in that sense. I mean, we're always adding more to FBX to help with our interrupt in the one-click back and forth between products, but there's always performance improvements actually in all of our products across the board. So I know on the Mudbox side we have substantial performance improvements. That's with every release we keep upping that, making sure the tools work faster, the viewport faster. And with Maya, of course, it's always getting faster, as Daryl was talking about the viewport. But as far as being able to handle anything differently, specifically out of Mudbox, nothing specific there. I mean, you could start to nitpick on that and talk about DX11 and the really cool new stuff there, and the fact that it handles vector displacement natively now in Viewport 2.0. That's pretty cool, and that comes right out of Mudbox. Not sure if that answers your your question there.
I got another one on the stream here. Can PaintFX combine with particles and or cloth?
Yeah, you can. I mean, usually the route I go for that kind of thing is converting PaintFX to a mesh. So that's, but there are other kinds of ways you can. For example, now, which I haven't really explored much, but for example, this object that this PaintFX is being attracted to and moving around, I mean, that could be a cloth mesh that's simulating potentially, So, so an example where that might be useful. I've got another scene here. Let me just.
On the beta board, some people, when they were playing around with the new PaintFX stuff, I saw one of our clients dropped some particles down. They ended up doing a geometry instant onto the particles so that they could have a true piece of geometry to collide with those. But they were getting some pretty cool interactions between just some rain coming down onto a grass field, I think it was, and it looked really pretty solid. It was cool.
Yeah, I mean, you can the new Paint Effect stuff has collisions with meshes. So, for example, if I had a rolling ball going on a field of grass, right? Now I could just simply pick the rolling ball and the Paint Effects and do Make Collide, and it will push the Paint Effects aside. So you can kind of interact it with your dynamics that way. Yeah, and there are a lot of other kind of clever tricks you can use. Some things that you've been able to do, like with the tune line, which is sort of Paint Effects based, you can have tunes do intersection of meshes. So you can take two meshes and you can create a tune line for them and have only intersection lines. And that creates a Paint Effects stroke along the intersection of the meshes. And then you can convert Paint Effects to poly or Paint Effects to curve, and then you can use those as like particle emitters, or so there's a lot of potential for kind of interaction with Paint Effects in the dynamic system.
Now, there was a question again for you, Duncan, around the Paint Effects internal limit to 10,000. Any news? I'm not sure which limit he's talking about.
Yeah, boy, that sounds familiar. I think I might have gotten. I can't remember all these issues, but I remember submitting a bug on that was on the forum someplace, and I can't remember if I returned a fix for it or not. I'd have to go in and look. So I'm sorry. I mean, a lot of these things, I'll kind of do a quick fix and return, and it doesn't end up in a release note anywhere. What's new, and so I just that one I remember seeing the question again later, and I can't remember if there was.
We'll get back.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we changed that one or not.
Yeah, they asked the question twice. They were really interested in knowing.
Yeah.
And it turns out you've got a nickname now online because of your hat. Everyone's like, Swag is talking. All right. So anyone else here in the room have any questions?
I can take that. My first guess would be is that you. She asked about when you're working and all of a sudden all the hotkeys stop working, and my first guess to that would be caps lock is turned on. And
that happens to me.
I've ripped caps lock off of all of my keyboards. It's actually gone. And now in 2014, they've added if Craig or Duncan hits caps lock, or maybe it doesn't work on the Mac version, or it might be turned off. But if maybe
the little thing will come up.
The little thing comes up and says caps lock is now on.
Yeah,
so at least now I've got a bunch of broken keyboards, but it has an error message that just floats on your screen now. So good chance you have caps lock turned on. That would be my first guess. And if that's not it, I'm sorry.
Yep. Swag has another question.
So it's in relation to Creative about 2013. In the graph editor, even if you set your keys before you start animating to plateau, if you have two keys that are exactly the same, the animation, the curve won't be straight because one of the keys will always, the tangents will always be off. It's like it does it on default to all of it. It's like the tangents are just always off. You always have to make them correct. By default,
You can change. So in your system preferences, you can change what type of key and what type of curve you have. So in Maya, we have weighted curves, non-weighted curves, and we have lots of different tangent types like auto tangent and things like that. So change it in your preferences, and then it won't be that way by default. It'll be whatever you set it to.
All right. Let me just see if we've got any new questions online. Lots of statements, not a lot of questions. Oh, he's back. Okay. Let's go see here then. If I had anything left in the stuff that was from before. No, I think we're good. So if no one has any more questions online, here we go. New question has just popped up. Breaking news. What's new in the final implementation of the BSDF shader mental ray in Maya 2014? Haven't played with it. Anyone played with it? Sorry, no clue.
Look, there are questions popping about things that people think we're working on, or things like that. And again, we have to go back to the original stuff, which is people are popping up code names and things like that. Yeah, again, there are things. Obviously, 2014 has shipped. We are working on new things. Anyone that wants to talk to us about new stuff or directions and things like that, these are the right places to start. There's the area where we constantly troll the area. You can contact. We're at trade shows, things like that. Product managers, most of them are in GDC right now. Or if you want to contact us directly, again, most times people that send us mails, usually they come to us. So again, you can send us mails if you're interested in talking to these things. Again, I think there's ICE in Maya, there's XGen, there's all these various things that people want to talk about. But again, these are conversations that you guys can have with us directly. And if you want to work on the future of the product or things like that, you can have those conversations with us directly.
Yeah.
Under NDA.
Yeah, under NDA. We will not be telling it to you so you can put it on your blog. It's generally not a way it works. So I guess we're coming to the end then of this session. I'd just like to once again thank everyone for coming out for this. We will be having the live main event happening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time later today, so you'll want to tune in for that. You'll see some more presentations of some of the new features, as well as a guest presentation from the person who created the VES Student Award-winning short. You'll want to check that out. And we'll also have a panel discussion with a bunch of industry experts talking about how things are going in the entertainment industry. I think it's a fairly hot topic these days. Honest, we actually planned to hold this panel before everything kind of went crazy at the end in the last couple of months. Just added a little more fuel to the fire. So again, thanks everyone for coming out, and we'll shut down the stream now. And again, this video will be available in its entirety in the next few days online. Thank you very much, everyone.